They said, "You can just save again. Brooke needs this more than you." That's what my parents told me after my sister stole my entire $70,000 house fund, and yes, they helped her do it. Up until last month, I had $78,000 saved for my ideal home. My name is Claire, and I'm 28 years old. Brown bag lunches, 5 years of overtime, and refusing vacations were all gone in a single day. After emptying my account and driving off in a Mercedes, my sister Brooke waltzed into a bank. The worst thing? I was struck into silence when my parents, who I had run to for assistance, looked me in the eye and said, "You can just save again. Brooke needs this more than you." If you're viewing this, please hit the subscribe button and leave a comment telling me where you're from. You'll want to hear what transpired after I finally stopped being the doormat for the family, I promise. Growing up in the Boston suburbs, it was always obvious that Brooke was the family's star. Even as a teenager, my younger sister by 2 years had that carefree attractiveness that attracted attention. Brooke was the cheerleading squad's captain, and she had a trail of admirers following her around the hallways, whereas I was ungainly, attempting to fit in with braces and spectacles. David and Linda Thompson, our parents, never concealed their predilection. There would be festivities and presents when Brooke was named to the B honor roll. When I brought home consecutive A's, I would receive a clap on the back and be told, "That's what we expect from you, Abby." Brooke's physical prowess and gregarious nature appealed to my father, a high school football coach. As a real estate agent, my mother adored showing off her gorgeous daughter during open houses, saying it sped up the selling process. I grew extremely responsible since I was taught early on it was the only way to receive any attention in our home. I studied, joined academic clubs, and made plans for the future while Brooke attended parties and dated popular boys. I recognized that no one but myself would watch out for me, so I stopped doing it for attention, even though I knew that was not coming. It was during college that the discrepancy in income became unavoidable. Brooke attended a private institution where my parents covered all of her tuition costs. She changed her major 3 times before deciding on communications. I worked 20 hours a week at the campus bookstore and took out loans to cover the remaining balance while attending the public university on a partial scholarship. When I questioned my parents about why they wouldn't assist me in the same manner, my father responded, "You're smart, Abby. You'll be fine no matter what. Brooke needs the extra support." My life has been centered around those words. Brooke needs it more. I had $47,000 in student loan debt when I finished with an accounting degree. After graduating debt-free and jobless, Brooke returned home, where my parents turned the basement into her starter apartment. In order to pay off my loans in 3 years rather than 10, I rented a small studio with a roommate, got a job at a mid-sized accounting firm in Boston, and made a rigorous budget. Brooke was starting her 3rd unsuccessful business endeavor, a social media consultancy that primarily included my parents paying her to post images on Instagram while I was eating ramen and keeping track of every dime. They paid for her to take a lavish trip to recharge and purchased a business attire worth thousands of dollars when that unavoidably fell apart. For years, the trend persisted. My parents provided financial support to Brooke after she accrued credit card debt. They co-signed the loan because she wanted a new automobile because her old one was embarrassing for client meetings. In the meantime, I was improving my credit, being promoted at work, and eventually repaying my college loans. I started a separate savings account 5 years ago, specifically for my future home purchase, following a big campaign. I automatically deposited a percentage of my paycheck into this account each month. I looked into first-time homebuyer programs, kept tabs on loan rates, and determined how long it would take me to save enough money for a down payment on a modest property in a good neighborhood. My lone family ally was my grandmother, Margaret. She understood and valued my responsibility, unlike my parents. "Your sister may get all the attention now," she said to me while having tea on a Sunday, "but you're building something that will last." Financial independence is the greatest gift you can give yourself. She understood the need of independence because she had grown up during the Depression. Every time I was tempted to spend money on anything pointless, her advice became my motto. My family's situation appeared to be getting better last year. For more than a year, Brooke had been employed at a marketing company, which was her longest work to date. When I was promoted to senior financial advisor, my parents even threw a little dinner to celebrate my professional accomplishments. We were starting to feel like a typical family, with equal value for each member, for the first time in years. I relaxed as a result of my newfound comfort. I began talking more about my life, including how happy I was to be getting close to saving for a down payment on a home. 3 months ago, over a family dinner, I remarked that I had begun looking at listings and was almost ready to have money for a down payment. My mother remarked, "That's wonderful, honey," with genuine joy for me. In addition to Brooke asking to visit some of the homes I was thinking about, my father raised his glass and toast. I told them about my intentions to gradually update the old kitchen in a modest 3-bedroom house in a nearby neighborhood. They all appeared encouraging, making recommendations and showing enthusiasm. I felt like my family actually saw me and valued me for once. The subsequent events were all the more terrible because of that moment of connection. I made an appointment with Jessica, a realtor who was suggested by a coworker, last month. I had been dreaming, researching, and saving for years before I was finally prepared to put an offer on a house I had fallen in love with. It was a lovely colonial with a bay window that was ideal for reading and a tiny yard. In order to determine the precise amount I had available for the down payment, I made the decision to make one final check of my private savings account the evening before our meeting. I can recall every detail of that particular occasion. I had a cup of chamomile tea heating next to me as I sat at my kitchen table with my laptop open. The only sound in the room was my refrigerator's soft hum. I went in my savings area after logging into my bank account and gaped at the screen in shock. There was $138.22, where there should have been $49,872.33, the total of 5 years of careful saving. My initial assumption was that I had accidentally logged into the incorrect account. I went out and then came back in. The same figure. I thought maybe I had moved the money and forgotten, so I looked at my other accounts. Nothing. My heart started pounding. I dialed the bank's customer service number with trembling palms. I trembled as I said, "I need to report unauthorized activity on my account," to the representative. "Almost $50,000 is missing." I was placed on hold while the agent looked into it. As I paced my tiny apartment, terror swelling in my throat, those minutes seemed to drag on for hours. I was even more perplexed by her response when she came back. "Miss Thompson, I'm showing a withdrawal of $77,500 made 2 days ago at our downtown branch. It appears to be an authorized transaction. The withdrawal slip has your signature on it." "That's impossible," I made clear. "I haven't been to that branch in months, and I certainly didn't withdraw that money." The representative agreed to refer the matter to the fraud department after I verified my identity and answered security questions. They said they will look over the security tape and respond to me in 48 hours. Too upset to concentrate, I called off my meeting with Jessica and took the day off from work. My perplexity went to disbelief when the fraud department called me back that afternoon with news. "Miss Thompson, we've reviewed the footage from the branch. The person who made the withdrawal appears to be a young woman who presented your ID and knew all your security information, including your mother's maiden name and the verbal password on your account." I came to an unpleasant realization. That description could only be applied to one person who also might have access to my personal data. I already suspected the response when I asked, "Can you tell me where the money went?" The funds were withdrawn as a cashier's check made payable to Luxury Motors of Boston. After thanking the agent, I hung up and called my sister right away. No response. "I need to talk to you ASAP," I texted her. "There is an urgent situation." No answer. I heard the characteristic sound of a luxury automobile engine outside my building just as I was about to drive to her flat. Brooke was parking a brand new white Mercedes convertible in the visitor slot when I looked out the window. She appeared to have won the lotto as she came outside with sunglasses on her head. She didn't apologize or provide an explanation when I questioned her in the parking lot. Isn't she gorgeous? I got such a good deal, she added with a big smile instead. I stammered out, Brooke, did you take money from my savings account? She ran her palm over the car's smooth hood and shrugged. I needed it for the down payment. They wouldn't approve me for the full loan amount. That was my house fund, I replied, raising my voice in spite of my best attempts to remain composed. 5 years of saving. How could you do this? Perhaps even more stunning than the actual robbery was Brooke's callous disregard for my pain. Oh, don't be so dramatic, Abby. You can always save more money. You're good at that stuff. I needed this car now for my image. How am I supposed to impress clients in my old Honda? I exclaimed, you stole from me, as the situation's truth finally set in. You committed fraud. That's a crime. She gave an eye roll. It's not stealing when it's family. Besides, Mom and Dad said it was okay. I felt like I was physically struck by their words. Mom and Dad knew about this? Of course they did. I needed their help to find your bank information. They agreed you wouldn't mind. You've always been the financially responsible one, right? That's your whole thing. I felt as like the ground had vanished from under me as I stood in the parking lot, gazing at my sister relaxing against a car that I had bought with my dreams. I was in a trance when I drove through the suburbs to my parents' house, tears running down my cheeks. The streets where I had grown up suddenly appeared strange and unfriendly. How were they able to accomplish this? How were they able to assist Brooke in stealing what they knew was the result of years of my sacrifice and hard work? I had always been conflicted about our family's cozy 2-story colonial with a wraparound porch and blue shutters. I felt like I was entering an ambush today when I pulled into the driveway behind my father's Cadillac. As anticipated, both of my parents were at home on this Sunday afternoon. Their customary Sunday roast was being prepared in the kitchen by Mom. In the living room, Dad was watching golf. The air was filled with the comforting smells of rosemary potatoes and pot roast, which instantly made my stomach turn. My mother wiped her hands on her apron and exclaimed, Abby, what a nice surprise, as I entered. When she saw my face covered in tears, her smile vanished. Honey, what's wrong? After turning off the television, my dad came to the kitchen to join us. You look upset, kiddo. What happened? For a brief period, I questioned whether Brooke had lied about their involvement because their worries sounded so sincere. Perhaps they were unaware of it and would have been just as indignant as I was. Brooke emptied my house savings account, I exclaimed, closely observing their expressions. She took nearly $50,000 and bought herself a Mercedes. Their fleeting glances at one another validated it all. They were aware. Furthermore, I could tell Brooke had been telling the truth because there was no surprise or indignation. She had benefited from their assistance. My father started by saying, now Abby, adopting the conciliatory tone he employed when he believed I was exaggerating. I know you're upset, but try to see the bigger picture here. The bigger picture? I asked again, not believing myself. Dad, she stole from me. She committed fraud. She took 5 years of my savings. When my mother moved forward, she put a hand on my arm, which I quickly shrugged off. Sweetie, Brooke is going through a really rough time right now. After her breakup with Tyler, she's been struggling with her self-esteem. This car is giving her the confidence boost she desperately needs. What I was hearing was unbelievable. So her confidence is worth more than my dreams? My hard work? My trust? It's not like that, my father scowled over. Brooke needs this car for her career. How is she supposed to meet with high-profile clients driving that old Honda? This is an investment in her future. With a broken voice, I questioned, and what about my future? I was going to buy a house. I had an appointment with a realtor. I've been saving for 5 years. My mother said, you've always been good with money, Abby, as though that explained everything. You can save it again. You have a stable job. No debt. Brooke is still finding her way. Finding her way? She's 26 years old. When does she become responsible for herself? My dad's face became stern. That's enough, Claire. Your sister needed help, and we, as a family, stepped up. You've always been the successful one. Would it kill you to make a sacrifice for once? I was rendered speechless by the injustice of what he said. Give up something? What had I been doing all my life, in his opinion? Brooke entered through the front entrance, car keys hanging from her fingertips. She had changed into a new clothing that likely cost more than a month's worth of my mortgage funds, along with luxury sunglasses. She uttered, "Oh good, you're all here," as if she was unaware of the tension. "Mom, can you help me set up the insurance for the new car? The dealer said I need to do it by tomorrow." I gaped at her in shock. "Are you serious right now? You steal my money and then waltz in here asking for more help." Brooke gave an eye roll. "God, are you still upset about that? I told you, you can save it again." I angrily said, "You had no right to take my money," at last losing my cool. "Claire, please speak more quietly," my mother reprimanded. "The neighbors will hear you." "I don't care who hears me. I want my money back, Brooke, all of it." Brooke chuckled. "Well, that's not going to happen. The car is already registered in my name. Besides, Mom and Dad agree I needed it more than you need some house." I looked to my parents in the hopes, in the prayers, that they would correct her, that they would support me for once. Rather, my father protectively slung his arm around Brooke's shoulders. He remarked, "Abby, you're being selfish. Family helps family. Your sister needed this, and you have the means to recover. Why are you making such a big deal out of it?" I exclaimed, "Because it's theft. Because it's my money that I worked for. Because you've always favored her, and this time you've gone too far." "That's ridiculous," my mom yelled. "We've never played favorites." Brooke grinned. "Maybe they just love me more because I'm not obsessed with money and material things like you are, Abby." It seems that everyone but me missed the irony of her statement. She was standing there wearing pricey clothes, holding the keys to a fancy car that I had stolen. I whispered, "I can't believe this is happening," as I spoke. "I can't believe my own family would do this to me." Brooke remarked, "Oh, stop being so dramatic, it's just money. Only cash. Only 5 years of giving up." I had been striving for this dream since college. My faith and trust in my family were completely destroyed. I understood there was nothing more to say as I turned to face the three of them standing together, a united front against me, like always. My mother called after me as I started to go, telling me that I was exaggerating and that I should return to talk about this in a more reasonable manner. With tears clouding my eyesight so severely that I had to stop a few blocks away, I got into my car and drove away from the house where I grew up. I had never felt more alone in my life as I sat there in the silence of my car. A memory of my 16-year-old grandmother Margaret sitting with me on her porch swing came to mind as I fought to hold back my tears. Brooke had just beaten me out for a leadership role on the school newspaper, even though I was more qualified and had more experience. "Family is important, Claire," Grandma had remarked, rubbing my hand with her worn hand. "But there comes a point when you have to establish boundaries, even with those you love. Some people will take and take until there's nothing left of you if you let them." I hadn't fully grasped her meaning at 16. I finally did it at the age of 28, watching my life savings vanish into my sister's new automobile with my parents' approval. This was not a singular occurrence. I had been experiencing this trend all my life. My parents agreed to pay for my college education when I turned 18. They sheepishly stated that they had utilized the funds to finance Brooke's backpacking journey throughout Europe 2 months prior to my first semester, as she needed to find herself before attending college. I took out more debts. 3 years ago, our grandma passed away, leaving her collection of old jewelry for Brooke and me to split equally. By the time the division took place, Brooke had somehow taken all the valuable items, so I was left with emotional but useless costume jewelry. My folks had been in charge of the division and thought it was fine. I had swallowed my rage and hurt each time. I had always reminded myself that family came before worldly possessions. I had forgiven each time without getting an apology. However, things were different this time. They had gone too far this time and couldn't go back. I took a car to my favorite location with a view of the Boston skyline, Prospect Hill Park. I've always found that the scenery helps me think clearly and calm me down. I felt a resolve solidifying within of me today as I watched the sun set behind the city buildings. My dearest buddy Rachel buzzed my phone with a text. Are you all right? Our coffee date was missed by you. I had entirely forgotten about our regular Sunday night gathering because of everything that had transpired. I gave her a call right away. Abby, what's going on? Rachel inquired, her voice displaying concern. It's not like you to no-show. Still trembling, I said, can you meet me at Carlton's coffee shop? I need to talk to someone who isn't my family right now. After 20 minutes, I let out the entire narrative while seated across from Rachel in a peaceful area of the coffee shop. As I described what Brooke and my parents had done, Rachel's face changed from one of disbelief to one of indignation. When I was done, she remarked, Abby, that's not just wrong, that's illegal. Your sister committed fraud. She stole your identity and took your money. My parents helped her, I said, still struggling to comprehend that fact. Rachel took my hand and reached across the table. Listen to me. This isn't normal family behavior. This is toxic and abusive. You need to report this to the bank as fraud and probably to the police. I answered faintly, they're my family, which was the automatic reaction I had been taught my entire life. Family doesn't steal $50,000 from you, Rachel asserted. And this isn't the first time Brooke has done something like this. Startled, I looked up. What do you mean? Rachel sighed after hesitating. I didn't tell you this before because I didn't want to come between you and your sister. But 2 years ago, Brooke asked me for a loan of $10,000. She called it a business opportunity. When I said no, she somehow got my credit card information and charged almost $3,000 before I caught it. I gaped at her in shock. What? I reported it as fraud and got my money back. But when I confronted her, she acted like it was no big deal. She swore she'd pay me back, said she was desperate, and begged me not to tell you. I was angry, but I let it go after the credit card company refunded my money. I should have told you. I'm sorry. The last straw, the one that broke the dam I'd been holding back for years, was the admission that Brooke had stolen from others outside the family. With years of repressed hurt and rage leaking out of me, I dropped my head in my hands and sobbed in the coffee shop. Rachel shifted so she could sit next to me and put her arm around my shoulders. It's okay to be angry, Abby. It's okay to stand up for yourself. Even against your family. Especially against your family when they're hurting you like this. A peculiar peace descended upon me as my weeping stopped. Rachel was correct. The money wasn't the point here. Not at all. Respect was at issue. Limitations. Self-esteem. Throughout my existence, my family had trampled on all of these things. I muttered, I don't think I can ever save that much money again. At least not for years. That house I wanted, it's gone. Rachel responded, maybe not, with a contemplative look on her face. Didn't you tell me once that you set up some special security features on that savings account? A flash of remembrance. I had been concerned about internet security when I started this special house savings account. In addition to my regular banking password, the bank manager had recommended implementing a special verification code that would be needed for significant withdrawals. With a faint glimmer of optimism, I murmured the verification code. Brooke was unable to realize that. Rachel remarked, she must have gotten around it somehow. She concluded for me by saying, or lied about having it. Abby, I believe you should speak with that bank manager once more, as well as possibly a lawyer. I felt a gleam of possibility for the first time since I learned about the heist. Brooke's case was strengthened if she had gotten past the security barriers. They were attempting to paint it as a family misunderstanding, but this was intentional deceit. After straightening my shoulders, I made the decision to visit the bank first thing tomorrow. Rachel gave a nod of approval. And I'll accompany you. It's about time you got a support system for once. I became aware that I was at a crossroads as we were leaving the coffee shop. One road led to the well-known pattern of sacrifice without acknowledgement and forgiveness without responsibility. The unknown path of advocating for myself and possibly causing rifts with my family lay down the other. The quote from Grandmother Margaret that stuck in my head was, "The best gift you can give yourself is financial independence." But she had been mistaken about one thing. It was not financial independence that was the greatest gift. It was having the guts to demand respect because you value yourself enough. I went with the second route. With Rachel by my side for moral support, I entered First National Bank on Monday morning. Thomas Parker, the bank manager who had assisted me in opening my house savings account 5 years prior, was the person I had called in advance to arrange a meeting. Given how frequently I had visited in the early days of my savings journey, excitedly making deposits and talking about interest rates, it was not unexpected that Thomas recognized me. When I told him what had happened, his warm smile vanished. After looking at the transaction logs on his computer, he responded, "Miss Thompson, I'm really worried about what you're describing. Our additional verification protection, which necessitates a separate 6-digit number for withdrawals exceeding $10,000, was in place for this account. This code is not the same as your standard banking information." I affirmed, "My sister couldn't have known that code. I never told anyone about it." Thomas's face became grave. "Our records show that a verification code was used to process the withdrawal," but he paused, entering data onto his computer. "The system indicates that the teller manually overrode it following several unsuccessful attempts." "What is meant by that?" Rachel inquired. "It means that whoever made this withdrawal probably claimed to be you, didn't give the right verification code, but somehow persuaded the teller to process the transaction anyway," Thomas stated cautiously. "Is this captured on video?" I inquired. Thomas gave a nod. "Every transaction is documented, yes. Given the scale of the withdrawal, our fraud section ought to have looked into this sooner." He called the security office while speaking quietly. He hung up and faced me once more. "The video is now being sent over. Considering what you've told me, Miss Thompson, I strongly advise you to consult our legal department. This seems to be a blatant instance of fraud and identity theft." I was seeing security footage of my sister at the teller window in a conference room 20 minutes later. She wore glasses like mine, and her hair was styled like mine. By displaying my ID and engaging in a confident conversation with the teller, she was obviously posing as me. The video shows woman getting agitated when it was time to give the verification code, checking her phone several times before leaning in to talk softly to the teller. Thomas clarified, "She's saying she forgot the code. Your sister provided additional identifying information to prove she was you and stated she needed the money immediately for a medical emergency, according to the teller's report." What sort of identifying details? Even though I knew the answer, I still asked. "Your SSN, the maiden name of the mother, your first apartment's address." My parents would have had access to all of the information. I felt physically sick after coming to this conclusion. "What choices do I have?" I questioned Thomas. "You have a number of them," he said. "First, we can instantly freeze any more activity on all of your accounts. The second option is to formally report fraud to the bank, which would start an inquiry. Third, you should report this to the authorities as identity theft, and I highly advise doing so." Rachel gave my hand a firm squeeze. "You ought to complete all 3. If I report this to the police, my sister may be charged with a crime," I added slowly. Thomas gave a serious nod. "Indeed, bank fraud and identity theft are grave offenses, but since the money has already been spent to buy a car, it becomes extremely harder to get your money back without a police record." I inhaled deeply. "I'll carry it out. Everything." Once I had frozen my accounts and submitted the necessary papers to the bank, Rachel took me to see Ethan Stein, a financial fraud attorney. His modest yet polished office was filled with framed certificates and law volumes. Ethan listened to my account and replied, "You have a very strong case based on what you've told me and the bank's initial findings. It is the bank's duty to make sure that the right procedures for verification are followed. They have issues since the teller disregarded the security precautions." "How about my sister?" I inquired. "And my folks?" Ethan's face was serious as he leaned forward. "Your sister committed 2 federal offenses, bank fraud and identity theft. Your parents can be viewed as accessories if they intentionally helped her. However, without concrete proof, it might be challenging to demonstrate their involvement." He laid out a strategy. First, send Brooke a formal demand letter demanding that the entire sum be returned within 7 days. We would engage with the district attorney on possible criminal charges and pursue a civil case to recoup the money if she didn't comply. Ethan stated, "I want to make sure you understand what this means before we move forward. Family connections may suffer long-term effects from legal action taken against family members. Are you ready for that?" I considered how my parents disregarded my emotions. Regarding Brooke's careless stealing of my dreams. Approximately a lifetime of being the one in charge, expected to make sacrifices without protest. "Yes," I firmly said. "I'm ready." I made the decision to give Brooke one final chance before making the irrevocable decision to file a police report. That evening, I texted her this. "I've talked to a lawyer and the bank, Brooke. Identity theft and fraud are what you did. You have one chance to reimburse me for the entire money you deducted from my account. I'll be filing a police report and charging charges tomorrow if you don't. There is no danger here. It's the result of what you did." Minutes later, she responded, "Are you serious? LOL. For money, you would put your own sister in jail? I wish you luck in that endeavor. Your parents would never permit it." Any last misgivings I had were dispelled by her contemptuous demeanor. Officer Thompson, a patient woman who meticulously documented every aspect of my case, sat with me in a police station the following morning. Family financial fraud is surprisingly common and often goes unreported because victims feel guilty about getting family in trouble. "Unfortunately, we see cases like this more often than you'd think," she told me. I said, "I've given her an opportunity to put this right. Most people wouldn't do that." Officer Thompson gave a nod. "We'll look into this in great detail." After the police report was filed, Ethan sent copies of the official demand letter to my parents' address and to Brooke via certified mail. I also gave the finance manager at the dealership where Brooke had bought the Mercedes a call and explained the circumstances. "The car was bought using money that was obtained fraudulently," Ethan clarified over the 3-way phone call. "If you don't assist in getting those funds back, your dealership may be held accountable." The dealership expressed worry and said they would discuss the matter with their legal team and respond as soon as possible. My phone was inundated with calls and messages from my family during this procedure. Brooke wavered between sobbing entreaties about how I was ruining her life and sarcastic incredulity that I would go this far over money. The voicemails my mother left were a mix of carefully veiled threats and guilt trips. In his angry texts, my father accused me of being vengeful and self-centered. After a while, I stopped reading them and gave Rachel my phone, who sifted through the flurry of familial manipulation to remove anything significant. There was a huge emotional cost. Years of brainwashing caused me to doubt myself even though I knew I was acting morally. Did I overreact? Was I being self-centered? To protect the peace, should I just let it go? When familial gaslighting caused me to doubt myself, Rachel and my coworker Jenna became my rock and helped me face reality. I was connected to a family trauma therapist by Jenna, who had gone through similar family dynamics. During our first appointment, Dr. Samuel informed me that what your family did was more than just financial abuse. It was the result of a lifetime of scapegoating and emotional manipulation. Your response is about finally saying enough to the whole scenario, not just about the money. The dealership called 3 days after the certified letters arrived. They had made the decision to fully cooperate with the investigation after speaking with their legal department. They produced proof that Brooke had financed the remaining balance after using a cashier's check from my bank to make a down payment of $77,500 on the Mercedes. The bank's fraud investigation came to the conclusion that appropriate verification procedures had not been followed that same day. While Brooke's case was pending, they agreed to restore the entire amount to a new account and admitted their responsibility. It resembled the first light in a pitch-black tunnel. Although the bank's decision to return my money was a significant win, the consequences of my decision to advocate for myself were not yet over. Since Brooke avoided giving her home location, the process server decided that it was okay to serve her with legal documents at her place of employment, which I had not mentioned. As soon as the server left, she called me yelling. I had to keep the phone away from my ear because of how high-pitched her voice was. How could you make me feel so ashamed in front of my whole office? Everybody saw. I might lose my job. Brooke, you committed fraud, I said coolly. These are the results of what you did. This money belongs to the family, she shouted. You're acting absurdly. No. I had the money that I saved and earned. And now, before things worsen, you have an opportunity to put this right. She ended the call. My mother called a few minutes later. She started with my entire name, Claire Catherine Thompson, as she always did in a fit of rage. You have never let me down that much. Your sister is devastated beyond belief. How could someone be sent to her place of employment? Are you aware of the damage you have caused to this family? Mom, I had no say in where they served her. Indeed, I am fully aware of what I am doing. After being taken advantage of all my life, I'm now speaking up for myself. I've never heard something more self-centered. Claire, family supports family. Although your sister erred, to go to this extent for financial gain? To bring in the police and attorneys? What are people going to think? I no longer give a damn about what people think. What's proper matters to me. The call from my father was even worse. He didn't shout as Brooke or Mom did. Rather, his tone was icy and scathing. He remarked, "You've always been envious of your sister. However, I never imagined you would go to such lengths to harm her. You are no longer welcome in this family if you carry out this plan." I didn't want to admit how much his remarks hurt, but I didn't back down. Dad, I'm sorry you feel that way. I cherish you. But even my relatives won't be able to steal from me. When other family members started picking sides, things got out of hand. My mother's sister, my Karen Patricia, called to give me a speech on the importance of family loyalty and forgiveness. I was taken aback when my father's brother, my Jack James, offered to help. He remarked angrily, "Your parents have always allowed Brooke to get away with murder. It's about time she was held responsible." Brooke's decision was ultimately compelled by the dealership's cooperation and the legal pressure. She had to go back to the dealership to sign paperwork to return the automobile 2 weeks after I filed the police report. Because of the fraud probe, a police officer had to oversee the transaction. Although I wasn't expected to be present, Ethan suggested that I might help make sure things went according to plan. As Brooke, who didn't appear like the self-assured woman who had sported her new automobile in front of me, sullenly signed the paperwork, I stood in silence in the dealership's office. Her eyes were red with tears when she looked up at me once. "Are you content now?" she inquired. "Everything is ruined by you." "Brooke, this was your decision," I said softly. "You had the option to request a loan. You have the option to be truthful. You stole from me instead." Her voice broke as she maintained, "It wasn't stealing. It was merely a miscommunication. I was going to reimburse you in due time." "With what sum of money?" I inquired. "Never have you held a job for longer than a year. Never before have you saved over $1,000 all at once. How did you intend to repay $50,000? For that, she had no response. My mother couldn't help but make one more jab as Brooke departed with our parents, who had come to take her up. "I hope, Claire, you're happy. Now your sister has nothing. Due to you." Brooke was in the backseat of my father's Cadillac when they drove off, looking like a kid getting picked up from school. I kept thinking about what my mom had said. "Because of you, your sister has nothing left." No, I thought. Because to her own decisions, Brooke has nothing. And she still has more than most parents who would sacrifice everything to save her, who would stand up for her even when she was obviously in the wrong, who would provide her with a home and unquestioning financial support. What was it that I had? Yes, I have a bank account back, but I may never hear from my family again. As I drove home alone, that notion weighed heavy on my mind. Had I made a wise decision? Would my family's rift ever mend? My apartment building. I was unable to identify the number. With hesitation, I replied, "Claire? It's Martha, a friend of Grandma Margaret. Your grandma gave me your number years ago in case of an emergency, so I hope it's okay to call." "Is everything all right?" I inquired, instantly alarmed. "Yes, sweetheart. However, I learned about what has been going on through the family grapevine. You know Margaret would have been proud of you. In the past, she had to cope with comparable problems with her own sister." Stunned, I sat in my car. "Did she?" "Oh, that's right. Once, her sister stole savings bonds from their father that were supposed to be divided between them. The only person who opposed her was Margaret. Although the family was incensed at the time, they all acknowledged years later that she had been correct." My eyes filled with tears. I was unaware of that. She didn't enjoy discussing it. However, she once told me that the hardest and best thing she had ever done was to confront her sister. Eventually, their entire relationship improved as a result. In the challenging weeks that followed, that talk was a lifeline. My parents continued to communicate with me only via terse text messages, maintaining their freeze-out. When I walked into a room, extended family get-togethers turned into uncomfortable events where people were picking sides and whispering to each other. Brooke ultimately agreed to pay back the extra expenses I had paid, including legal fees, lost interest, and the emotional distress compensation Ethan had insisted on including. After being presented with the bank's proof and the possibility of criminal prosecution, secured by a formal judgment that would impact her credit in the event of a default, she would make payments over a period of 5 years. The most trying time was when my mother texted me, "At 3 p.m., we will be eating Thanksgiving meal. Brooke will be present. If you're still insistent on this absurd lawsuit, please don't come. We wish for a tranquil vacation." For the first time in my life, I would miss a significant family holiday. In spite of all, the exclusion was extremely painful. Instead, Rachel invited me to Thanksgiving with her family. She insisted, "My mom already loves you because of all my stories. And my brother can't wait to meet the fierce woman who confronted her sister who was stealing." Thankful, but still hurting from being kicked off of my own family table, I accepted. It was 6 months later. Not only did spring bring flowers, but it also brought fresh starts in my life. I was standing in the kitchen of my new house, which was one I had discovered and fell in love with during my resurrected house hunt, rather than the one I had originally intended to purchase. Although it wasn't as big as my initial vision of a 2-bedroom cottage with a modest backyard, it was still mine. My whole funds had been recovered by the bank settlement, and I had enough money for the down payment and closing expenses after Brooke's initial restitution payment. I thought about how much had changed since that terrible day when I realized my savings were gone as I unpacked dishes into my cabinets. Brooke had undergone the most unexpected metamorphosis. Nothing else had ever made her face her behavior like the repercussions of her actions, almost being charged with a crime, losing her job when the news spread about her workplace, and having to return to living with our parents. She called me to ask if we could meet up 2 months after I gave the car back. Still not totally convinced of her intentions, I recommended a public setting. Before she talked, there was an awkward pause between us as we sat in a coffee shop. She looked into her coffee and remarked, "I've been taking these financial management classes. Although it's stipulated in the settlement agreement, they are genuinely assisting." I had no idea how misguided my financial thinking was. I remained quiet, awaiting her next move. "I've been using spending to feel better about myself, and Mom and Dad have enabled me to do so my entire life," the counselor says. Then, Maybe for the first time, she actually looked up at me. And that I have treated you unfairly. It was more self-awareness than I had ever heard from her, but it wasn't nearly an apology. She added, "At the moment, I work at a call center. It's solid, but it's not glamorous. I'm living on a budget for the first time ever, and I have a roommate." She eventually apologized sincere by the third time we met. "I apologize, Abby. I made a mistake. Totally incorrect. I'm trying to improve, but I can't go back." It was a beginning, but our relationship was far from repaired. It had taken my folks a while to warm up. Until Grandma's friend Martha stepped in, they continued to put up a united face of disappointment and rage. She mediated a challenging but essential talk and invited them to lunch without informing them that I would be attending. She openly reminded them, "You've always had two different standards for your daughters." Margaret noticed it. I witnessed it. It was seen by all. Brooke was rewarded for her recklessness, but Claire has been penalized for her responsibility all of her life. Martha interrupted my mother as she began to protest. "Recall the time David's father handed you all money to start your lives, Linda? If David's parents had urged you to just earn your share again after his sister had taken it, how would you have felt?" That was a poignant question. Perhaps for the first time, my mother gave careful thought to how their behavior appeared to me. My parents' progress was inconsistent and sluggish. We started off with brief, uncomfortable phone conversations before things grew more relaxed. We had come to a provisional truce by the time I closed on my house. Although they hadn't assisted me with moving in, that would have been premature and excessive. My mother did send a houseplant along with a letter that said, simply, "Well done. Love, Parents." I had suggested family therapy, and to my astonishment, they accepted it. My father was still not convinced that they had given preference to Brooke, so our first session was heated. However, by the third session, the knowledgeable therapist had enabled us to all recognize patterns that none of us had previously completely recognized. Children are frequently unintentionally given roles by their families, Dr. Laura said. It was simple to take Claire for granted since she took on the role of responsibility. Brooke started acting as though she needed help, which made it simple to justify her actions. Although decades of hurt were not immediately healed by these realizations, they did provide us with a vocabulary to discuss what had transpired and why. As I was setting up my new kitchen on this bright Saturday in May, the doorbell rang. When I opened it, I saw my mother holding a casserole dish while my parents stood clumsily on my front porch. With hesitation, she answered, "We brought lunch. If you don't mind." After a brief moment of hesitation, I moved aside to allow them entry. "I just unpacked the kitchen, and it's a complete mess." My father said, "We can help," in a rough but earnest tone. We had a cautious but friendly conversation while we unpacked boxes together. They commented on my new neighborhood, complimented the house, and even stated that Brooke had gotten a little raise at her job. According to my mother, she continues to attend those financial classes. She claims that they are altering her perspective on everything. I said, "That's good," with meaning. My father cleared his throat as we sat on folding chairs in my partially furnished living room after lunch. "Abby, I must apologize to you. It wasn't right what we did, what we've been doing for years." The words hung in the air between us, words I never thought I would hear from him. Quietly, my mother said, "We were wrong. We ought to have given you the same amount of assistance as Brooke." I apologize that it took this drastic measure for us to notice it. The pain of a lifetime persisted even after their imperfect apology. However, it was a start, a genuine one. I threw my first dinner party in my new house 3 weeks later. Naturally, Rachel and Jenna arrived. Brooke followed suit, bringing a bottle of wine that she had actually saved for. Dessert was brought by my folks. We were joined by Martha, a friend of grandmother Margaret, who shared heartwarming and humorous memories about my grandmother. I discovered that I had won something far more significant than the money I had retrieved as I glanced around my table at this patchwork of relationships, some new, some old, some repairing, some transformed. I was now more respectable. Additionally, I had set limits that my family was maybe beginning to respect for the first time. It had been a tough but essential journey. Like grandmother Margaret before me, I had never done something as difficult or rewarding as standing up for myself. When everyone had gone later that night, I sat on my new porch swing and gazed up at the stars. I reflected on my progress, not only in getting my money back, but also in regaining my value and voice. If you're watching this and having trouble dealing with family members that use your generosity or goodwill, be aware of this. Setting limits is not selfish. Rather, it is essential. The individuals we love the most might sometimes be the most difficult to confront. However, reciprocal respect is necessary for wholesome relationships. Have you ever had to set up challenging limits with relatives? What gave you the confidence to do it? Please share your stories in the comments section below. If this story spoke to you, don't forget to like and subscribe. Recall that advocating for yourself does not imply a lack of affection for your family. For all parties involved, including yourself, there are instances when it's the most loving thing you can do. And that's my story. In the end, the best revenge wasn't a courtroom win, it was building a life of peace, purpose, and self-respect. Sometimes, silence speaks louder than shouting, and walking away with your head held high is the loudest answer you can give. If you're dealing with betrayal, I hope you remember, healing starts with boundaries, and strength grows where you choose growth over bitterness. Have you ever faced a moment like this, where standing up for yourself changed everything? Share your story in the comments. Let's heal, grow, and rise together.